This is an art collage novel video. I made this series so you guys can experience the story faster. The video will focus on the character's psychology, the images are for illustration purposes only. The hexagonal blue mark was floating between the two doors. Yunxiao's fierce eyes gradually returned to normal, and his lunar pupils appeared in his eyes as he stared at the mark, trying to break through the seal and see the scene behind the door. There was a vast white light inside the door. The power of the moon pupil carefully bypassed the blue seal and rushed into the door, staring into the vast space. A wave of spiritual qi rose up and turned into a mist that drifted in the air. Some trees could be vaguely seen in the mist, and it was as if they were in a mountain range. Looking forward, he saw a simple wooden house. In front of the house was an empty flatland, where a large refining cauldron was placed. Purple smoke was slowly rising from it. It was a typical alchemist's decoration, but there were dozens of coffins neatly placed around the cauldron, some horizontal and some vertical, which was very strange. Some of the coffins were transparent, and the items inside were all strange. They looked familiar, but upon closer inspection, they didn't look like anything. Yunxiao's eyes grew suspicious as he continued to use the power of the lunar pupil to peer into the cabin. Gradually, two figures appeared in the house. One was old and the other was young, but the house had already been isolated. The power of his moon pupil was too far away and had reached its strongest limit, so it could no longer penetrate through. The old man and the young man seemed to be talking about something, and the old man even got up and walked back and forth several times. Yunxiao frowned. Although the power of his lunar pupil could penetrate space, the isolation barrier on the cabin was too strong, so he could not hear the conversation inside. Suddenly, the old man turned around, as if he had sensed someone peeking at him. The young man also stood up in shock and stood behind the old man vigilantly. An extremely angry and gloomy voice burst out from the house, roaring, "Who's so bold? You dare to spy on me?" Then, a terrifying spiritual storm rushed out of the small house like a monster opening its huge claws to capture the power of the moon pupil. Humph. Yunxiao snorted coldly. The pupils in his lunar eyes recovered from the strange symbol, and his spiritual power instantly returned to the door from thousands of miles away. The man's spiritual power was also very strong, and he actually managed to track Yunxiao down. He rushed into the blue symbol on the door and condensed into a ferocious beast that was several feet tall, roaring as it swooped down at Yunxiao. "Although I still don't know who you are, since you are related to Wei Qing's mark, I will find you sooner or later." Yunxiao's face was cold as he stared at the diving spiritual beast and cried out softly, "Pupillary power mirror flow." The figure of the spiritual beast was imprinted directly into Yunxiao's right eye, becoming clearer and clearer. At the same time, he disappeared from the real world without a trace. Bang! In Yunxiao's eyes, the spiritual beast's face showed a ferocious and shocked look. Suddenly, an infinite power of the eyes bombarded him from all directions, crushing him into pieces in an instant, turning him into wisps of spiritual power and dissipating in the lunar dimension. At this moment, the blue mark on the door gradually became clear. A foot stepped out from inside, and then a figure appeared. A person wrapped in a long robe seemed to have stepped over. A cold gleam flickered in Yunxiao's eyes. His pupils narrowed, and a faint golden light appeared in them. Suddenly, thousands of golden lights gathered on the door and formed a supreme giant sword, which directly slashed down from the sky. Boom! The sharp sword qi was unstoppable as it slammed into the door. The two forces were in a stalemate for a moment before the door was split in half. The black-robed figure was also slashed apart. The man in the black robe slowly raised his head. He tried his best to open his eyes as he was being torn apart, wanting to cross the infinite space and see the person in front of him clearly. However, the golden light was too dazzling, and his body had already collapsed under the golden sword. He used the last bit of his spiritual consciousness to gather in his eyes and tried to look at it. The cold and gloomy eyes finally penetrated the golden light and saw the appearance of the person in front of him. His eyes instantly widened, revealing a look of disbelief and horror, as if he couldn't accept what he was seeing. Boom! The entire door suddenly collapsed at this moment and exploded, turning into countless fluorescent spots that disappeared into the soul space of Binchen. The black-robed man also turned into smoke in an instant under extreme shock. At some point in time, Yunxiao's appearance had changed to that of a slightly burly man with a golden skin, short hair standing on end, and a cold glint on his angular face. It was completely different from his original appearance. The demonic dragon suddenly laughed and said, "You're too mean." In the end, he actually turned into Ao Chongkong. Wouldn't Wei Qing be scared to death? Humph. Yunxiao snorted coldly, and his body instantly changed back to his original appearance. That black-robed spirit sense should be a spirit sense left behind by Wei Qing. If I didn't intentionally let him see my face, he wouldn't be able to see me with his meager strength. However, it's the old man behind this door, Lao Ai. I have some guesses, Yunxiao said after pondering for a while. A cold glint flashed in his eyes as he turned around and left the soul space of Binchen. The demon dragon shook his head secretly. In his previous life, Yunxiao was a lord that no one could afford to offend, but in this life, he seemed to have become even more powerful. Those who accidentally offended him would be in deep trouble. A moment later, Yunxiao's soul power rushed out of Binchen bodies and returned to his own. Binchen opened his eyes and seemed to have noticed the change in his soul. He exclaimed in surprise, "How is it?" Yunxiao nodded and said, "Someone has indeed done something. Through that restrictive barrier, someone can watch your every move at all times. Even your physical condition can be transmitted to the outside world at any time. Now that I've destroyed the restriction, the person who cast the spell already knows. As expected. You should die." Binchen was filled with anger, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. He said coldly, "Do you know who did it?" "It was not the same person who cast the restriction and monitored you," Yunxiao said. "The one who cast the spell was Wei Qing, one of the 5 rulers of the Holy Region. Do you know him?" Binchen's face revealed a look of shock and he said in shock, "Saint level? I don't know this person." Yunxiao nodded. "Then it must be the person who is monitoring you. I still have some guesses about his identity, but I can't be sure." Binchen's eyes flickered with a cold light and he said fiercely, "If you help me find out who that person is, I'll teach you the method to open the 3rd door." The expression on his face became more and more ferocious, and it was obvious that he had an extremely strong killing intent. No matter who it was, their every move had been monitored for so many years. Anyone would go crazy and kill. Yunxiao's eyes flickered with joy as he said with a smile, "With such generous conditions, I will definitely help you find out this person's identity." It was only then that Binchen's faces changed slightly, and their lips moved slightly as they taught Yunxiao the method to open the gate of rest. Yunxiao quickly listened attentively, as if he had understood something. "You can go back now, I need some time alone. The dazzling treasure meet is about to begin. You must be careful." Be careful?" Yunxiao looked at Binchen with a smile in his eyes. "Humph." Binchen snorted and laughed, "Stop pretending in front of me, kid. I don't believe that you can't see the significance of this treasure show. However, this matter is also extremely important to me, so I can't tell you more. Just be careful and don't die. I'm still counting on you to find the person who's been watching me." Yunxiao chuckled but did not say anything. Then, he turned into a bolt of lightning and shot into the sky. As Binchen watched Yunxiao leave, their faces gradually turned solemn, and their eyes were filled with contemplation. Then, they turned and returned to their rooms. Yunxiao returned to the market and continued to plunder, exchanging for some extremely precious heavenly materials and earthly treasures. After that, he returned to the spatial mystic artifact in the small courtyard and began to cultivate in seclusion. 3 days later, the dazzling treasure meet began as scheduled. The entire island had become unusually lively. Everyone was flying towards the largest building on the Xiankong Island. The building was dome-shaped and was specially prepared for the treasure exhibition. In front of the building, there were a few powerful marine race experts as guards. They stood on both sides to welcome everyone and to maintain order. The successive meetings of the Xiankong Island had been exceptionally smooth, and there were no fights. As for the fights after leaving the island, the Xiankong Island sect did not care about them. When Yunxiao arrived, Liao Yongbing and the others were already waiting for him at the door. As soon as they saw him, they immediately rushed up to greet him, and then they stepped into the venue together. The space inside was even larger than it looked from the outside. It was in the shape of a ring, and there were thousands of seats, but it was quickly occupied by various sea race members. The whole field was noisy. Yunxiao and the others sat in the middle, looking inconspicuous, but they were all frowning. It was their first time attending the auction of the Sea Tribe. They felt that the Sea Tribe was overexcited. It must be known that the Sea Race was rich in materials, but they were extremely short of profound-level weapons. Moreover, this kind of material exchange event was very rare, so it was very precious. Many of them had come from tens of thousands of miles away. Ahem, everyone, be quiet. In the center of the ring-shaped arena, a ray of light fell. In a flash, Zhao Wenjuan's figure appeared. He coughed a few times, and the entire arena immediately quieted down. Not a single sound was made. Yunxiao found it funny. Although these sea people looked fierce, they seemed to be very obedient. The noisy venue suddenly became eerily silent. Zhao Wenjuan smiled and said, "Thank you, everyone. You have come all the way here to support our dazzling treasure meet. This meeting will be hosted by me, the 5th Island Master of Xiankong Island, Zhao Wenjuan." He laughed, "Let's stick to the old rules. Before we start showing off our treasures, Xiankong Island will first list out 100 Xian artifacts for everyone to bid for. Among them, there are 48th tier profound armaments and 67th tier profound armaments. I hope everyone will like them." He clapped his hands, and a passage opened beside the central station. The sound of rolling wheels could be heard from inside. Everyone's eyes lit up. 10 clam girls appeared one by one, pushing the weapon rack. There were all kinds of weapons on it, such as sabers, spears, swords, halberds, forks, and so on. Most of them were long weapons. The clam girls were all extremely beautiful, but everyone's eyes were fixed on the 10 rows of weapon racks, which were shining. Zhao Wenjuan laughed. It's very simple to exchange for these profound-level weapons. You just have to bring any kind of natural treasure and get the approval of the clam girl in front of the weapon rack. You can take any one of them. Not only were the clam girls beautiful, but they were also specially trained appraisers. They had an extremely keen sense for all kinds of natural treasures. Whoosh. Immediately, someone rushed to the stage and took out a small piece of mud-like object. It looked black and dirty, and he handed it to a clam girl. The clam girl revealed a charming smile on her face. She touched the mud with her jade-like fingers and revealed a surprised look. Her smile became even more charming as she said, "Sir, you can choose any one of them." The man was overjoyed. After handing over the mud, he immediately opened his hand and pulled out a halberd from the weapon rack. He waved it a few times in his hand and then happily put it into his storage profound-level weapon and left the exhibition stage. Fuck. I had my eyes on that halberd at first glance, but he actually beat me to it. A member of the Sea Tribe suddenly stood up. His eyes were filled with ferocity as he glared at the previous member of the Sea Tribe. Zhao Wenjuan sneered. You can't cause trouble at the treasure exhibition. It's better for you all to calm down. First come, first served, there are still 99 pieces left, is there no one that you're interested in? Whoosh. 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 As soon as he finished speaking, light rushed into the stage from all directions, handing over the treasures they had brought in exchange for the profound-level weapons they had their eyes on. Once again, the crowd became restless, but everyone was trying their best to control their emotions. Once they made any trouble, they would be killed by the Xiankong Island experts in an instant. Naturally, Yunxiao would not take part in this kind of exchange of low-grade profound armaments with rare treasures. He had exchanged all the low-grade profound armaments he had on him, and he still had a few good ones left, waiting for the opportunity to sell them. The people who rushed up the stage were all from the sea race. All of a sudden, there were a lot of empty seats. The human race's martial artists sat in groups, with the Biming family as the leader. The rest were those who were close to Yunxiao, and they had gathered together with him as their leader. There was also Shui Xian, Run Xiang, and Fei Ming, who were sitting together alone, right in the middle of the two groups of people. Judging from Biming Lifeng's triumphant look, he seemed to have exchanged a lot of good things recently. Yunxiao scanned him with his divine sense and found that he had also reached the peak of 3-star martial sovereign realm. Perhaps he had swallowed some heavenly and earthly treasures directly. Biming Lifeng noticed that Yunxiao was looking at him. He turned his head and snorted fiercely, then turned his eyes to Shui Xian with a fanatical look in his eyes. With a faint smile, Yunxiao retracted his gaze and began to observe the field. Many oceanic species experts sat calmly in their seats without moving or communicating with anyone. It was obvious that they had a bigger goal, and these profound level weapons were not in their eyes. From the dome, one could faintly sense the elemental energy fluctuations of many experts. They should be the Xiankong Island's martial artists who were in charge of maintaining order. A few of them were so strong that even Yunxiao's expression turned serious. He had been thinking about the purpose of this dazzling treasure meet. Even Bin Chun had warned him to be careful, but he couldn't figure it out. At this moment, most of the profound level weapons on the stage had been sold out. The materials submitted by many people were rejected by the clam girl. They could only exchange for those 7th-tier profound level weapons with a gloomy face. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, all 100 pieces of profound level weapons were sold out. The clam girls pushed the weapon rack away from the exhibition stage with smiles on their faces. Pa. 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 Zhao Wenjuan clapped and smiled. Congratulations to the 100 friends who have obtained their desired profound level weapons. Next up is the Wondrous Item Appreciation segment. Friends who want to auction, please come up on stage. The so-called Wondrous Item Appreciation meant that everyone would take out their own treasures to auction. This was also the main content of the dazzling treasure meet. After this segment, it would be the final segment, where the Xiankong Island sect would bring out 3 supreme treasures for the finale auction. Yunxiao looked at them with great anticipation, hoping to get some more treasures. There was a checkpoint in this segment. The treasure of the person who brought his own item must be inspected by Zhao Wenjuan. If the item was not qualified, it would not be qualified to participate in the auction. Most of the sea race cared about their reputation, so they wouldn't embarrass themselves if they weren't 100% confident. If the market was filled with commoners trading in the past few days, then this dazzling treasure meet was where the aristocrats were trading. Everything that appeared was definitely of high quality. A while after Zhao Wenjuan shouted, a man flew up the stage. The man was wearing a reddish-brown robe and had a thin and long body. This was extremely rare among the sea race. He opened his hand, and a small jade box opened. There was some fine sand of various colors lying inside. He slowly said, "Mr. Wenjuan, please take a look. Is this good enough?" Zhao Wenjuan stared at the 5-colored fine sand for a while and pointed his finger in the air. Suddenly, a few grains of sand shot into the air and slowly spread out, like a thin layer of 5-colored fine net, but also like a light smoke. Zhao Wenjuan's eyes revealed a strange look. "The ocean-less secret sand from the North Sea?" he asked in surprise. A look of surprise flashed across the man's face as he nodded and said, "That's right. Mr. Wenjuan is very knowledgeable, this one is impressed." Zhao Wenjuan said, "This ocean-less secret sand is an item used by the Palace of the North Sea. It is strictly prohibited for outsiders to use it. It's not easy for you to make such a small box, so you're qualified to participate in the auction." The man let out a sigh of relief. This time, he smiled and said, "I want to use this box of ocean-less secret sand to exchange for some heavenly materials and earthly treasures that can help me break through the barrier of my realm." Whoosh! There was an uproar below. There were many types of heavenly treasures, and those that could break through the barrier of cultivation were undoubtedly the most precious. Zhao Wenjuan said loudly, "Heavenly materials and earthly treasures that can help one break through realms are indeed precious. But the ocean-less secret sand of the North Sea is also a rare item. In addition, the Palace of the North Sea has ordered it to be specially used. It is even more precious. It is enough to offset the price. There were all sorts of discussions below. Runxiang's face was covered with a layer of frost, and killing intent flickered. Someone shouted, "That's true, but the oceanless secret sand is only an alchemy material. How many people can use it? And the heavenly treasures that can help one break through the barrier of cultivation can be eaten by everyone, their practical value cannot be compared." "Shut up if you don't want to buy it," the owner of the endless sea secret sand said coldly. "You can't tell the price. If I hear any more nonsense, humph." A murderous intent flashed in his eyes, and he released his aura slightly. Suddenly, everyone felt an inexplicable pressure, and their faces changed, one after another, they closed their mouths. Zhao Wenjuan's face turned cold. He immediately pushed the oceanless secret sand back and said in a cold voice, "The treasure exhibition is about showing off your treasures, not your cultivation. You've lost your qualification. You can leave now." "Mr. Wenjuan, I'm only warning those who have eyes but fail to see," the man said in shock. Zhao Wenjuan said coldly, "What you are doing has nothing to do with the Xiankong Island. However, you have violated the rules of the dazzling treasure meet. Do you want to go down by yourself, or do you want me to get someone to send you off?" The man's face was filled with anger as he said, "Mr. Wenjuan, I've come from far away, please give me another chance." Zhao Wenjuan snorted, "Even if you came from outer space, you have to go down. You broke the rules. It's better for you to stay down there quietly and look around. Maybe you'll find what you want." The man's face was extremely ugly, but he also knew that there was no way to save it. His eyes burst out with a fierce light as he stared at the person who had spoken before and walked down with a gloomy face. The person who spoke earlier had his face turned ashen. He quickly left his seat and walked out of the venue. Zhao Wenjuan said indifferently, "I will repeat the rules. This is to show off your treasures, not your strength. No matter who you are, you can't break the rules. Let's go next." At this moment, 2 people from the south and north each went up the stage and handed over the items they had prepared for the auction. They were a bamboo and a black pearl. After Zhao Wenjuan's brief explanation and exchange, he said loudly, "1,000 bird divine wood and MOUJU, 1 for 9th tier mystic weapon recipe, 1 for 9th tier mystic weapon." "What? A 9th tier profound armament recipe and a 9th tier profound armament? These two must be crazy poor." "That's right, those 2 pieces of trash added together can't even be compared to a 9th tier profound armament. They actually want to exchange it separately, and even exchange it for a refining recipe. There are idiots every year, but there are especially many this year." All sorts of discussions sounded, and the 2 people on the stage immediately changed their expressions. Both of them were filled with anger, but because of the previous precedent, their eyes were spitting fire, but they didn't dare to make a sound. Yunxiao rose to his feet, then turned into a beam of light and landed on the stage under the surprised gazes of the crowd. Staring at the wooden block in one of the men's hands, he said, "This is indeed the 1,000 birds divine tree, but it's not worth much. If you can find some high-quality wood, I will exchange with you." "You have a recipe for 9th tier profound level weapons," the man was overjoyed. Yunxiao nodded and said to Zhao Wenjuan, "Mr. Wenjuan, do you want to take a look?" Zhao Wenjuan laughed and said, "If it was anyone else, they would have checked. But you, young Master Yunxiao, can avoid it." Joy flashed across the face of the man holding the 1,000 birds divine wood, but he soon revealed a difficult expression and said, "But I only have this lump in my hand." Without a word, Yunxiao turned and was about to leave. The man immediately panicked and said, "Human friend, please wait. Let me look around." Everyone was stunned. They knew that he had something good to hide, so they all laughed and scolded him. "I only have a small section of the divine tree's main material, about this long," the man said, his face red. He gestured with his hand and found that it was only half the length of an arm. "This little divine wood can't even be exchanged for a 9th tier mystic artifact recipe on the continent," Yunxiao said with a sneer. "I'll see you again if you don't grow it 20 feet long." He turned around to leave. "Hold on." The man hurriedly shouted, his expression changing several times. He gritted his teeth and said, "My divine tree is indeed nearly 20 feet long, not much different. However, can I first take a look at this friend's profound level weapon refining recipe and see if it is what I want?"